God is easily the most mysterious character in One Punch Man. Every time he's on screen, the mood completely changes to one of intrigue, dread, and excitement. His plan to find a perfect vessel has spanned across time and space, bringing him to inevitably battle against one very powerful and very bold individual, Saitama. It was confirmed that the sheer presence alone of Saitama has been drawing God closer and closer to our dimension. We learn from Orochi that the altar he found underground depicts God needing a sacrifice. What's important, however, is that the cave painting depicted many different things being sacrificed, including what even looked like prehistoric creatures. This indicates that God has been getting his dirty little hands on our planet for quite some time. Thus, an immune system is needed to fight back. That being Saitama, who we know has transcended as a human by breaking the limiter God placed upon him, which is how he got the title of the Fist that went against God. And so that's why today we will be exploring every instance in which God has appeared in the story, trying to find his perfect vessel and conquer the earth. Now, throughout this journey, God has had a few different appearances. However, the most unique and the first one we see is the version which resembles a gust of wind forming a humanoid shape. This was God appearing before Homeless Emperor. The once normal office worker had had enough of being screwed over by society as he was framed for sexual harassment. After this, he also lost his place to live, hence the name. Thus, he planned to abandon human society altogether, and so in an attempt to become one with Mother Nature, he was ready to end it all. But moments before he went through with it, God appeared. He granted Homeless Emperor a divine power that he could use to fight back against the human scum of the earth. However, as soon as Homeless Emperor put God's identity at risk, he took both his powers and life away just as quickly as he had given them through forfeiture. This is when we got the now iconic coloured pages of not only God eerily scaling the surface of the moon from the darkness, but another one of God's many appearances as what looks to be an earthly, fleshy being formed from natural substances that were falling apart within Homeless Emperor's mind. Which brings us onto how God truly looks like, thanks to Psychos, who was not only blessed by his power, but his appearance. She said it looked like brain cells, the structural diagram of the universe, Jupiter's surface. What she didn't realise, however, was that this wasn't her first encounter with God. Her goal, similar to Homeless Emperor's, was to wipe out humanity, a goal she had had since she was just 17 years old as part of hbuckley's little group in school. To become powerful enough to achieve this goal, she researched the third eye. This was the ability that gave Shibabua the ability to predict the future. What she saw, however, was an overwhelming sense of dread as God showed her the future. This broke Psychos completely and sent her down the dark path of creating the Monster Association. Following her defeat while she was being detained by the Hero Association, hbuckley went to visit her in order to gain answers about this god, as she'd actually peered into her former best friend's memories on the battlefield, which is when she saw God appear before her in her mental image. The trio of psychic women being blessed by God's image, however, continues as hbuckley's sister Tatsumaki was actually one of God's legitimate targets as a vessel. Whilst she was resting up after her long fought battle with Sairochi, Tatsumaki was approached by none other than Blast, who offered her help. Except it wasn't him. As Blast was the one who saved Tatsumaki as a child and sent her on the path she's now on, he is the only person that she truly admires and looks up to. Other than Saitama, of course. But because of this, his words stuck with her. When the time comes, don't go expecting someone to rescue you. That is how she immediately saw through God's disguise and had the mental fortitude to combat his manipulation, making the real Blast very proud. Now, Blast has been at war with this god for the past 20 years alongside his Guardians of the Galaxy pals. Which brings us onto the encounter they had in person 2 years ago whilst Blast was fighting Elder Centipede. Back then, God tried to coerce Blast into accepting his deal like he did with Tatsumaki, but refused it. Due to this god being a 5th dimensional being, there was nothing the Hero Association could do, hence they kept him quiet. However, Blast and his allies behind the scenes have been tracking down the mysterious cubes capable of turning humans into monsters, which also acts as a communication device to God if they touch it via tearing a rift in the fabric of space. Which is exactly what happened to Saitama, Flashy Flash and Monako. They found themselves digging through rubble to find Flash's insta-kill sword. However, during their rummaging, Saitama came across one of these cubes which had trapped Flashy Flash's arm. Now, of course, Saitama being Saitama, didn't care too much about it, and so he quickly pulled it out and chucked it away. Nonetheless, the cube was so dense, full of God's power, that it shattered the floor upon impact. Now, as Blast said, touching it tears a rift in space, which is what happened, as when Monako tried to escape through a hole in the rubble, she was instead met with a vast space of nothingness. However, what they were truly looking at was God in a separate dimension, waiting for his vessel. He tried to get the three of them to touch it and make a wish to see if they were worthy of his power and being his vessel. However, Blast intervened before God could get his way. We've actually seen quite a few of these cubes now in the One Punch Man story, highlighting different places that Blast and his crew have discovered them. For example, there was of course the one in the Monster Association, then another was found amongst ancient Egyptian treasure in the Volume 23's bonus illustration, and the fact that the Hero Association had said that these cubes had been used to communicate with God over time would suggest that it actually was from as far back as ancient Egypt, and that they had also been victims of God's manipulation. The cover of chapter 133 also shows us two more cubes, one found floating in space and another deep underwater. We also know that 18 years ago Blast found one whilst invading the Tsukiyomi facility where he saved Tatsumaki. This facility closely resembles another place he visited 18 years ago in the webcomic, the Ninja Village. Now, we have no confirmation that Blast did pick a cube up here, but the fact that the ninja leader is stupidly strong and has lived for 300 years, it wouldn't be too far-fetched to suggest that he took God's power from the cube. Plus, it's not really like Blast to just do something without having some kind of connection to either God or his cubes. Therefore, I think it's highly likely that he found one there too. However, this then brings us onto the only time God actually did get a vessel, Garou. During his fight with Saitama, the two went at each other so hard that they began to create a spatial distortion which broke a hole in God's seal, allowing him to break through. Once Saitama did land the decisive blow on Garou, suddenly he heard in the distance,
"I can hear you."
However, Saitama seems to be one of the only ones that can actually hear it, which all makes sense when you remember that he touched the cube. Suddenly, strange thunderclouds begin to form one after another as God began his way to Garou, yet nobody else could actually see what was happening, as remember, God is a fifth dimensional being beyond our human senses. As he approaches Garou, he explains that his deepest wish is on the verge of falling apart. Now remember, a wish is important to get God's power, as that is what he uses to manipulate you into taking his deal. He tells Garou there is only one fist that can counter the fist that went against God. The Fist of God, which is when Bang appears before him with his hand reaching out, but again, just like with Blast and Tatsumaki, it's not the real one. After accepting just a partial amount of God's power, the real Bang knew better than anybody that his former student wasn't being his usual self, and quickly caught on to the fact that he was being controlled, something Blast then confirmed, warning Garou that every time he used the divine power he was given, the entire planet was put at risk. However, much more than just Earth was in danger, as together with Saitama, Jupiter and even entire galaxies were destroyed. Something God had all witnessed as we saw his spine protruding from behind the moon, watching over them. In fact, when you read this entire arc again, if you hadn't already, you will notice that the moon is almost always shown in the background, foreshadowing that God was eerily waiting the entire time, watching the war take place, waiting for his moment to pick the right vessel. In fact, scratch that. The moon was seen all the way as far back as Boris's death, as he talked about, get this, prophecies. That's right, One and Murata have planned God to be the final villain from the very beginning. Ultimately, however, Garou made the wrong choice, as once he came to his senses and realized he had become something he never wanted to after killing Tario, he began to teach Saitama a technique to allow him to travel back in time and fix things. God didn't want this to happen, and so he took back his power through forfeiture, just like he had done with Homeless Emperor. But again, thanks to touching the cube, Saitama heard it all. Caped Baldy then successfully travelled back in time and defeated Garou before he could take God's offer, but lost his memory of everything that had happened in the process. God, on the other hand, being a 5th dimensional being, will likely have not, meaning he will now know that there is no better vessel for him than Saitama, meaning that the final battle of One Punch Man is finally beginning to heat up. Now, if you want to learn how Saitama can even face such a being, watch this video on your screen where I explain every time Saitama used his true power and used his serious moves.